So we were discussing yesterday different mitzvahs of the aspects of Kiddush. We spoke about the Machlokes, Ramban, and Nafkaminas, and some other questions came up. So we left off discussing the following question. There's the famous question of the Dagul Merivava, one of the commentators on Shulchan Aruch, also known as the Nod de Yehuda, also known as the Slach, depending on which sefer he's writing, or where he's commentating, or where his commentaries from. So the Torah tells us, Zachar Yom Shabbos L'Kodesh, remember the Shabbos day, and the Gemara in Brachos tells us in Afchaf, as well as the Gemara in Shvuos, that Nashim Chayavas B'Kiddush Hayom Dvar Torah. The women are obligated in Kiddush, same as men. They are biblically obligated in the mitzvah of Kiddush. There's no difference between a man's obligation Friday night and a woman's. They're both biblically obligated in the mitzvah of Kiddush. But tradition has it's less now than it was 100 years ago, 50 years ago, but the common practice was the men went to shul and the women used to be home. And not only did they be home, I don't know how many used to daven at one point, I don't know how many knew how to daven, but even today I'd still say more men daven than women, but obviously the percentages are the more women coming to shul, and even the women who don't come to shul are davening. Yes. But the Dagul Merivava is working with the assumption that the man goes to shul, or doesn't have to go to shul, he could just be davening at home, but the man davens ma'ariv and the woman does not, which leads him to the following question, that there's a major machlokes rishonim when we talk about the obligation of making Kiddush. How much of it is biblical? Is the whole Kiddush biblical from top to bottom, or only a certain aspect is biblical and the rest is rabbinical? So the three parts to the mitzvah of Kiddush. There's the actual saying of the words, there's the actual doing it, holding a cup of wine, and the third aspect, Hamavarach Sarach Shayitom, and the third aspect, that's drinking the wine. And Lichatchila, the one who makes the Kiddush should drink a certain amount, a rov revius of the wine. But b'diavad, as long as everyone drinks a little bit, Shtiyas Kula Mistarfin. So the three parts to the Kiddush, the words, over a cup of wine, and the drinking. So the Rambam is clear, the mitzvah of Kiddush Minat Torah is fulfilled with words alone. That's all you need to fulfill your mitzvah Minat Torah. Over the cup of wine, drinking it, that's only a din d'Rabbanan. And the Bali Tosfos in Arvei Psachim and the Nazir point out that no, not only is the drinking, not only is the saying of the words Minat Torah, but actually doing it over a cup of wine. Zachreo, the Gemara says, Zachreo alayayin, they learn it's a real din daraisa. And you have to remember, you have to say Kiddush over alayayin. You don't have to actually drink it, that's already that's D'Rabbanan. So according to some opinions in the Bali Tosfos, the first two steps are biblical. Saying the Kiddush over a cup of wine. So if you said the Kiddush and no cup of wine, you wouldn't fulfill your mitzvah Minat Torah. So according to the Bali Tosfos, you need the first two. And Rashi and Nazir and others point out that all three are biblical. The Gemara is talking about if a Nazir, obviously someone takes a neder to become a Nazir, so they want to know, what about Kiddush? Could he drink Kiddush? So it's a whole discussion how you learn that Gemara, but the way Rashi learns the Gemara, it's Mushpa V'Yomim Har Sinai. Every Jew took a shvua in Har Sinai, they're going to make Kiddush. So therefore, it's like, if I take a shvua, I'm not going to put on tefillin, I don't have to keep shot. It's a meaningless shvua because it's being mevatel a mitzvah. So Rashi clearly learns, and it's not really Rashi, but it's a Nazir, but we'll call him Rashi, the Mefaresh, that not only is saying Kiddush biblical, not only is doing it over a cup of wine biblical, but actually drinking the wine to fulfill your mitzvah Minat Torah of Kiddush. Hence, even a Nazir has to drink wine because it's already a biblical obligation to actually drink the wine. According to Tosfos, it's not an issue. There's no problem for a Nazir to hold wine, or maybe you get into things that lead to it. And certainly, according to the Rambam, it's not a problem. It doesn't come up. So the three shitas in the Rishonim, we generally paskin like the Rambam, that to fulfill our mitzvah min Torah of Kiddush, all we need is words alone. And Rabbi writes, that's what we went into yesterday, Zechira Shevach, perhaps it's not enough just to say good Shabbos, maybe you need more. You have to go into the praises, the uniqueness of Shabbos like we do in our Kiddush. Which leads the Slach to the following question. If we fulfill our mitzvah min Torah of Kiddush when we daven Friday night, and both men and women, how do we know why are women obligated in Kiddush? Isn't it a classical case of a mitzvah aseh shazman grama? Isn't it a classical case of a time-oriented mitzvah, so why should women be obligated? So that's the famous drush in the Gemara, kol yeshnu b'shmira, yeshnu b'zechira. Whoever is included in Shmira Shabbos, whoever has to keep the negatives, are also included in the positives. So the Gemara in Shavuos is the same drasha, and therefore it's clear women are chayim in Torah. So if, again, the assumption is if women have not davened Ma'ariv and the men have, and the classical way is a man comes home and makes Kiddush for his wife, we have a major problem, because a man is only obligated midrabanan in Kiddush. He already fulfilled his biblical obligation. His wife is still obligated in biblical Kiddush, so we have a general rule: someone on a lower level obligation cannot do a mitzvah for someone on a higher level. So the reverse, if I was chayiv min Torah and you midrabanan, I can do it for you if we're equal. If I'm on a lower level obligation, so then the rule seems to be that when I'm considered eino mechuyev b'davar, I'm considered regarding you. I'm not someone who's obligated in the mitzvah, because you're obligated in. So biblically speaking, I'm not even obligated in the mitzvah, and therefore I can't do the mitzvah for you. So that's his question. How do we explain the minig Yisrael of the husbands making Kiddush for wives, or any man making for women, working with this assumption? So the Duggan Rabbi says, you know what, the simple solution: have your wife start davening, have the woman in the house, whoever we're talking about, let them daven also, and hence we level the playing field, and therefore, but according to the Tzach, it seems to be a problem, but he says, if you daven, you could the very pragmatic solution, at least even if you don't daven, at least talk about praise, special praise to Shabbos. In fact, that's how some point out, maybe when the woman does the Hadlakas Neiros, there's a certain, I don't do it, but there's a certain Bakasha they have in many of the Sidurim, where you talk about the praise of Shabbos, and perhaps they fulfill also that biblical obligation, or like we mentioned yesterday, perhaps, again, there's a point of contention, but perhaps coming home and saying good Shabbos would be enough. And some say you should say, to fulfill everyone, you should say Shabbos Kodesh, say a good Shabbos Kodesh. Maybe saying a Shabbos Kodesh is good enough to talk about the uniqueness of Shabbos, and therefore maybe even according to the Rambam, it would be enough. But either way, that's what some suggest. Yeah, Jeff.
You spoke about leveling the playing field. Now, man, it's not true that if he's heard the shofar, he can still blow it for other people. Why? Because Kol Yisrael, so that might be another aspect.
That's very good. So Jeff's alluding to, we weren't going to do that number one, but now that he mentioned it, we will. Or number two, if you count the Duggan Ravav as one, that he says, the Aruch HaShulchan writes, it's not a problem. We have a principle of Yatsa Motzi, which is, generally speaking, let's say we all come home, no one has fulfilled the mitzvah of Kiddush yet, we're all on the same level, and so I go and make Kiddush for everyone, that's Shomei Ka'oneh. We all are on the same level, and therefore the Kiddush is Shomei Ka'oneh. By you listening to me, you fulfill your mitzvah of Kiddush. Maybe it's actually you're saying Kiddush, that's a separate share, what's Pshat and what's the Lamdas of Shomei Ka'oneh. But the bottom line is, whether you heard Kiddush or made it, yes, either way you fulfilled it, so we'll keep it at that. So, however, that's when we're all chayiv minah. But let's say I already made Kiddush and someone else has to hear Kiddush. So Pashas Yatsa Motzi, all Kol Yisrael Rebim Zelazeh, my mitzvah of Kiddush isn't complete until everyone in Hamilton or anyone I could get to any Yid who hasn't heard Kiddush right now. It's part of my obligation, not only mine, yours also, but everyone's obligation to make sure as many Jews hear Kiddush Friday night as possible. So even if I did it, I can make Kiddush 50 times. That's true. So why here? There's a potential issue, because the Rush writes in Brachas, women perhaps aren't included in Arevis. Kol Yisrael Arevis is a Rush that writes that a woman is not b'chal arvis. It's a question: why wouldn't a woman be included in arvis? So that's a separate share. But Rabbi Akiva points out, no, it wouldn't apply here. What the rush means is, if a woman's not obligated in the mitzvah, then she's not included in arvis. But any mitzvah that a woman's included in, i.e., she's chayiv in Kiddush min HaTorah, so therefore Aruch HaShulchan says no problem. Continue everything. Yatsa Motzi, I can make Kiddush 100 times because until every Yid who hasn't fulfilled his mitzvah, my mitzvah is incomplete, and therefore I could make Kiddush for everyone. So according to Aruch HaShulchan, he's not bothered by it. Others don't. Either they don't go with the Aruch HaShulchan, maybe they don't learn with Rabbi Akiva, whatever the reason, they come up with different answers to solve the problem. There's a famous answer of the Chasam Sofer, the Mishnah Berurah quotes. He says, we know we have a general principle in Shas, mitzvahs srichas kavana. Mitzvahs require intent. And actually, it's a machlokas in the Gemara whether mitzvahs require intent. And of course, I always like pointing out, what do you mean? We're about to put on tefillin. One rabbi says, make sure you don't have kavana when you put on tefillin. No one says that. This is a post facto machlokas. Everyone agrees you should have kavana, but the question is, if you do a mitzvah without the requisite kavanah, I have to do the mitzvah over again. Is it meaningless or still meaningful? So that's the machlokas in the Gemara. We pass the mitzvah srichas kavanah, and the Magen Avraham and other Acharonim point out, l'halach l'maisa, we have a compromise. When it comes to a mitzvah min HaTorah, if it's a biblical mitzvah, we pass the mitzvah srichas kavanah. That intent is critical. And the mitzvah d'Rabbanan, we can be lenient since it's a machlokas, and we say you don't have to redo the mitzvah. So since Kiddush is a mitzvah min HaTorah, and therefore especially when you're davening Shemona Esrei Friday night, it's the first time you mention the uniqueness of Shabbos. So since mitzvahs require intent, so number one is most people don't know they're supposed to have kavanah. So if I didn't say anything, it wouldn't be an issue. But for those who know that one can fulfill the mitzvah of Kiddush now by davening Friday night, so therefore the Chasam Sofer writes, one should have negative kavanah. In other words, you should have kavanah to fulfill your mitzvah of tefillah, of davening, but don't have kavanah. Most don't have kavanah, or at least don't either have negative or best be neutral, not to have kavanah to fulfill your mitzvah of Kiddush, and therefore you go home and you're both of you are still chayiv min HaTorah in Kiddush, and therefore it's not a problem. That's how the Chasam Sofer answers the kasha. The Minchas Chinuch has another famous answer to this question. The Minchas Chinuch attacks it from a different issue. He wants to attack the kasha. Up to now we're saying it's a good question, and we're trying to give answers to the questions. The Minchas Chinuch wants to deny the premise of the kasha. He says, who says, is that true? Even if you work with the Rambam, that you fulfill the mitzvah of Kiddush with words, is that true that by davening Friday night in Shemona Esrei you fulfill your mitzvah of Kiddush? How could that be? Because the Gemara tells us in Arvei Psachim, the Gemara tells us that to fulfill the mitzvah of Kiddush, as we mentioned twice in the Aseret Dibros, there's two parts. God is the Borei, and He's the Mani. God is the Creator, as well as He runs the world. And therefore, to fulfill your mitzvah of Kiddush, you have to mention Zecher L'Yitzias Mitzrayim, but also Zecher L'Maseh Bereshis. You need two aspects to fulfill your mitzvah. That you have to mention God's the Creator, as well as He's the Mani, He runs the world. And last I checked, at least in my text in the Friday night Shemona Esrei, we only mention Zecher L'Maseh Bereshis. We say Vayechu Hashamayim V'Haaretz. There is no mention of Zecher L'Yitzias Mitzrayim. So the Minchas Chinuch says, I don't know what's the kasha. I don't understand the kasha of Dagam or Revava. The question doesn't begin because you don't fulfill your mitzvah of Kiddush, because the Gemara says in Arvei Psachim you have to mention both. No one argues on that Gemara, and therefore continue. It doesn't make a difference. The man and woman can daven Friday night. There's still chayiv min HaTorah in Kiddush when you get home because you haven't fulfilled the mitzvah of Kiddush.
So according to this last opinion, I mean, then saying good Shabbos to your wife, or her saying good is certainly not work.
Correct. That's a non-issue. If Friday night davening doesn't work, but then it doesn't have to work. You don't want it to work.
Oh, right. Yes.
Or at least it doesn't have to, because everyone's not.
So
right. So therefore, and however the Minchas Chinuch says, according to me, when would it be an issue then? When Yontif falls out on Shabbos. When we daven a sholosh regolim shmona esrei, so then we do mention Yitzis, and then you could,
right.
but then it could be, when Yontif falls out on Shabbos, then we'll have to deal with. Then maybe he'll come on to the other answers. But
negative kavana or something.
Yeah, but then on a regular basis, isn't really an issue. What are the other Mefarshim assume you are Yotzei Kiddush? What do they do with this Gemara? So either they're going to say it's only a din d'Rabbanan that you have to mention Yitzias Mitzrayim. We're talking about a din d'Oraisa that you Yotzei, or perhaps they want to say that in Achinami there is Yitzias Mitzrayim. We know we have a lacha Smuchas Gul Tefillah. We have a mitzvah of being Soma Gayis, and in the Shema we're mentioning all about Yitzias Mitzrayim. So maybe perhaps Samach where Shemona Esrei is, and therefore maybe that would be enough. That you don't, and so therefore they, that's how they deal with the issue. But ultimately they say the Minchas Chinuch fundamentally disagrees with the premise. He says that he says that you're not Yotzei. So they point out as follows. So we had the answer of the Dogam or Rivava, let's level the playing field, everyone daven. It's not an issue. We had the Chasim Sofer, just don't have Kavanah to fulfill your mitzvah of Shmona Esrei. So you have the negative Kavanah. We had the Minchas Chinuch who denied the premise. You're not Yotzei Kiddush in your davening Friday night. There's no Zeichel Yitzias Mitzrayim. And there's another approach by the Pri Megadim in this Psicha Koleles. He points out this touches on a fundamental yisod, not limited to this question. It touches on a fundamental question of any time you have a mitzvah min Torah, and then the rabbis add a component to the mitzvah, i.e. Kiddush, let's talk about. Kiddush, Zachar Shom HaShabbos L'Kodsho, it's clearly a biblical mitzvah. And yet the rabbis, and according to Rashi, the whole thing's biblical. But according to the Rambam, Zachar al-Yayin, the rabbis are saying not only should you recite the Kiddush, but you should do it over a cup of wine and perhaps even, drink wine midrabanan as well. So how do you view when you have two components of a mitzvah? You have an aspect which is biblical and an aspect is rabbinical. The rabbis told you to do a mitzvah a certain way, and let's say you don't listen to what the rabbis say. You just fulfill the biblical mitzvah without fulfilling the rabbinical mitzvah. So do you still fulfill your biblical mitzvah? And how much power the Chachamim have? When the Torah tells us, "Go sasim in adavar, asher yagidu yamino small," could the rabbis uproot a mitzvah in our Torah? So, for instance, what's the classical case? The Gemara tells us in Sukkah that min Torah we know you fulfill your mitzvah of Sukkah if you're sitting inside a Sukkah. What happens if you're inside the Sukkah but your table's outside the Sukkah? And we all know we follow the ribs, we follow the food. And therefore the rabbi said you can't sit in the sukkah where the table is outside because you're going to end up eating outside the sukkah. So it's a machlokas rishon, and what's pshat? The Gemara says someone who ate with the sukkah, with his table outside the sukkah, lo kiyamta mitzvah sukkah kol yamecha, has not fulfilled his mitzvah sukkah his whole life. So it's a machlokas rishon, how far do we take it? Tosfos writes, you haven't fulfilled your mitzvah of sukkah. And Rabbi and others, the Ran, say you have to fulfill your mitzvah lechatchila. I wouldn't say you have, but according to the Baalei Tosfos, we see that once the Chachamim changed the mitzvah, it's not that I fulfill my mitzvah of sukkah, but I'm lacking a din d'Rabbanan. You can even entertain that my mitzvah in Torah haven't even fulfilled. Or like Rabbeinu Yonah writes in the beginning of Brachas, the Mishnah says in Brachas that even though you really have until Alos HaShachar, until dawn, to say Kriya Shema Amita, but the Chachamim say Ad Chatzos. So Rabbeinu Yonah in the beginning of Brachas entertains the question, what happens if I say Kriya Shema after Chatzos? Perhaps I haven't fulfilled my biblical mitzvah, because once the rabbi said you only can do it Ad Chatzos, so then perhaps they even uproot. So that's what the Pri Megadim raises here. That maybe when it's true, the mitzvah, even according to the Rambam, the mitzvah min Torah of Kiddush is with words. And the rabbis came along and said, Al Yayin. But now if I go ahead and to try to fulfill the mitzvah of Kiddush against the Takanas Rabbanan, so maybe we're assuming like the Magen Avraham Yotzi, a mitzvah of of Kiddush and Tefillah. No, if there's no wine, perhaps one could argue you have nothing. And therefore, if you don't fulfill the mitzvah, like they discussed Tisha B'Av, like in terms of, like all the 4 fast days of Minchas, that's why there was no days. It was always the 4th month, the 5th month. It was later on the rabbis instituted the day. But today we have a specific day. So now could I just choose any day of the month? So at one point you could. But today, that once the Chachamim instituted it's the 10th of Tevis, I can't just pick another day. So that's what the Pri Megadan raises. He has a tremendous chiddush. He wants to say that perhaps if you don't do the mitzvah of Kiddush al Yayin, you haven't even fulfilled your mitzvah and Torah. Others disagree and say it's different. In those cases, with Rabbeinu Yonah, with Bracha, with Shema, and Sukkah, that's together. They're making a gzeira. We're worried about making a gzeira not to do it. By sometimes the mitzvah is only being added, like maybe like shofar not blowing shofar on Shabbat. So some want to claim that perhaps on the Pasha says we wouldn't say like the Pri Megadan, that they're just adding another aspect, but they're not making it totally different, a new takana to take away. So they're working with if you take the Pri Megadan Yesod with those we've shown him, then we say you're not yotze your mitzvah of tefillah, because if you don't do it al hayayin, it's a nothing. And hence, when you go home, you're still chayav min Torah in Kiddush. So let's summarize. So we explained both men and women are chayav min Torah in Kiddush min Torah. Nashim chayavas, because even though it's a mitzvah sasei azman grama, because yeshnu b'shmira, yeshnu b'zechira, and therefore where men and women are equal in the mitzvah of Kiddush. So how could it be then? Usually the men are daven Friday night and the women don't. So how can a man go home and make Kiddush for his wife? She's still chayav min Torah, and the man is only chayav midrabanan. So the Dogma says, go good. So let the woman daven and take care of that problem. But the woman can't daven. So A2 we have the Aruch HaShulchan that says Yatza Motzi, that even though I fulfill my mitzvah, until every Jew has fulfilled the mitzvah of Kiddush, my mitzvah of Kiddush is lacking. Hence, I could go ahead and make Kiddush 100 times like I do by shofar. We had the Chasam Sofer A3, negative Kavana. We had the Minchas Chinuch, it's not a problem. There's no Yitzias Mitzrayim. And on Yantiv, what it is, so then maybe you have negative Kavana. Or we had A5, the Pri Megadan, that if you don't make Kiddush al Yayin, you don't even fulfill your mitzvah of Kiddush, period. And hence, you're both on the same, you're on the same playing field, and hence there's no problem. The man could go home and make Kiddush for his wife. And then we had the Rabbi Akiva Eger saying Gulai, good Shabbos, and that's the minig of women making the Tchina by Hadlakas Neiros, that they, assuming the Magen is right, so then we either say good Shabbos, or we say a Shabbos Kodesh, or we do the Tchina, and therefore women also fulfill the mitzvah in Torah, they're also Lichayev Midrabanan.